everyone, and thank you for joining in today on the second episode of the Funding Show. Today we have the founder of DeepSync Technologies, Ishan, who is going to be telling us about their fundraising journey and how and what are they doing, and how were they able to. I think you raised two rounds, right, Ishan? So how were they able to raise two rounds of equity financing, and we'll get to know a lot more around valuation, the framework around that, around the complete story from start to end, around their pitching, around the things that they were prepared for. And so, without further ado, Ishan, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and DeepSync, I think that would be a great way to begin.
Sure. So, thank you so much, Yash, for inviting me on this show. I just want to give you a background about, what we do like as founders, and then I'll give you an idea about what DeepSync does and what we're trying to build really.
Yeah.
So I'm Ishan, everyone, and I basically have an engineering background from SM University. It's in Chennai, and as long as I remember, I think for the 4 years when I was in that university, I spent most of my time actually building stuff or doing some side projects in the engineering space, right? Either building new technology or working on new projects. And that was, I think, the good times that I remember. I don't remember the class times at all. I do remember the time which I spent building with my friends or
Sure.
with my. And a bit background on the idea that I spent after I graduated in 2017. I spent some time in Bangalore working in a company called TapChief as an intern for a while, because I wanted to get an idea about how the startup world functions. Of course, it's different from when you're building a company in college versus you attend a company which is out in the real world, facing real world problems, and so forth. After that, it was a quick stint there, and then I went to work on a company called Rocketium, which is a video-based platform. It's in Bangalore. Amazing team, amazing founders. Then in between, I spent some time in Berlin, Germany. I spent almost 4 to 5 months in Berlin working in research areas like hardcore deep tech technologies like blockchain, for example, or autonomous vehicles, for even 5G, for example, in Berlin.
Wow.
And of course, AI. And the focus of that 5 minute stint was to get into an idea of the global world, global perspective, like how the things are shaping, not Indian perspective from a global standpoint. And it gave me sort of a very thorough understanding of the framework that allows companies to build deep tech companies and what goes behind that. Because of course, deep tech companies are characterized by what is their IP. That's the major, right? What innovation they can bring, something 10 times faster, better, or more economical than the status quo, than something which is already existing in the market. And building that requires a sort of different discipline altogether. It requires different engineering viewpoint altogether than just building any product you want, right? So that was a good time because I learned a lot there. Then I came back, worked again for a company, and then quit in December of 2018 when we started DeepSync. A bit about my co-founder is also, he's been doing AI for the last 5 years. His name is Shikesh, and he's open source enthusiast, working in the area of deep learning for the last 4.5 to 5 years. He's also a speech technology expert, exactly what we are building in. We both met via GitHub, which is the mecca for software. And we met, and we started DeepSync again, as I mentioned, in December 2018. Now, a bit about DeepSync. So what we're trying to do is basically build AI that can create content. Very simple as that, right? Today, if an example of producing audio content, let's say this podcast, if this was scripted, for example, right? It takes enormous amount of time to produce audio content. You have to edit it, you have to record, then you have to do retakes, then do post-production, add music, so right? From our experience talking to multiple stakeholders in this industry, we learned that it takes almost 6 hours of work to produce 1 hour of output. This includes all these multiple work timelines, right? And this is enormously costly and time taking if you're trying to do this on a scale, right? In a world which is full of information and knowledge, producing content faster, economically, and at scale is an advantage for your customers, for your listeners, etc. And we realize that this is not possible today. So our technology allows a person to clone her voice, basically making an AI replica, which will speak just like them. The AI will learn about their voice, everything about them. It will learn their accent, it will learn how they speak, it will learn their language, how they pronounce, even voice, fluent expression. And Once it learns all these things, it can produce the same voice, the same quality of voice, but way faster and way cheaper, and do it at a speed which is scalable. So this becomes a
Correct.
counter to the creator to produce
Mhm.
content. And our aim is to, of course, democratize audio creation in this format for companies, for creators, and
Mhm.
allow to open, and of course, free up time for the creator in general. So that's the gist of it, what we're trying to do.
Awesome, man. And so there's, I mean, obviously a lot of things to unpack there. The first thing that I was, and probably this is because of the benefit of the hindsight, but I found now that when you summarize your own personal journey, it almost seems like it was meant to be, right? So when, so after engineering, doing a stint at a startup as an intern to see how the startup world works, then kind of moving on to other foreign countries and working in deep technologies to understand how the world works, and then kind of coming back and starting a deep tech company with some amount of understanding of the startup world and some amount of understanding of how deep tech works as well. So in hindsight, it kind of looks very like a fairly structured approach to starting a company, right? And an educated guess. Maybe the other thing, just a small thing that I wanted to point out was I think the 6 hours of prep time to make 1 hour of content, that may be just the professionals, right? So there are a lot of non-professionals who may take a
Right.
lot longer than that, right? So as an example, I mean, I obviously, before this podcast, I went through your website, and while you may be humble enough to not talk about it, but I was blown away by the small kind of a, I think it was a 30-second or a minute demo that you have on the homepage itself, right? So it's really really amazing. It sounded like the person was speaking, and it sounded so natural that you actually had to put a disclaimer over there that this is not him speaking, right? This is our technology that's speaking. And so that's so brilliant, man. So really amazing in terms of starting the company. So the next thing that I want to understand from you is in terms of taking stock, right? So typically, whenever any idea comes about on any, let's say if I want to start a company, typically what ends up happening is that there's this cycle, right? So you have if you have the team, then you're able to build the product. If you have the product, then you're able to get customers, and then if you have customers, you're able to get investors or funds. And then once you have funds, you then again kind of put it into the team, and then the cycle continues, right? And so but what's the first step? So what was the first step for you? How did you start and or break that cycle?
So this may not be true for everyone, but this is
Mm-hmm.
my perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first step is not to start a business at all. The
Mm-hmm.
first step is to solve a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like let the business grow out of solving the problem. If you
Mm-hmm.
start by solving building a business, it might not go right because you don't have the necessary framework what you're trying to build at all, right? So our
Yeah.
first insight was solve a problem, and if the problem is sufficient enough to be solved, it is good enough to be solved, then let the business grow out of it, right? Now,
Correct.
of course, you need some sort of initial ignition to start the company, right? You need some
Yeah.
funds, you need some time, and more than that, you need space and team to build that kind of initial product, right? In our case, it was just that, when we met on GitHub, as I mentioned, right, we
Mm-hmm.
started, basically building some side project just to, get an idea about is even feasible what
Correct.
to try, even feasible to build it. And we don't like, it's not like we have a PhD in particular speech synthesis, we have PhD in particular technology. We're just two people who are interested in
Yeah.
building this. Is it even possible or not? And as companies, it's not done anything formal, just a side project to see if something is feasible or not. And once we
Correct.
realized it is feasible to build it, then was the time to take some serious action, which in our
Mm-hmm.
case was to leave the job out and actually focus our full time on this particular thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now at the time we had some money saved up, because we knew we had to eventually start if this works. So we use that initial money from our salaries to give it initial ignition. But
Mm-hmm.
what happened, fortunately, at that time, we also got accepted in a accelerator program called Zeroth, which is a Hong Kong-based accelerator program. They invest usually
Okay.
in deep tech in India, and it was just one call that I did with Sachin, who is the Indian head of Siroth, and
Okay.
he to invest in our company, right? He agreed to invest in a small sum in our company, which is not much, just $20,000,
Mhm.
but it was good enough to at least begin, right?
Correct.
And that was starting point. So you are right on that, but there's always a cycle involved, and to break the cycle is to figure out one part of the cycle which you can get earliest, right?
Correct.
And just start that point of view. So if this team, get the team. If it's money, get money. But as I mentioned, look to solve problem first before you try to build a company out of it. Yeah.
Correct. And that's an amazing point to make, right? And this is something that we and so let me go a little deeper into that statement, right? Because we hear this almost in a lot of different events, and in whenever there's a podium full of generic people, they'll always say that, hey, if you're solving a problem, then wealth will follow, or if you're creating value for someone, then wealth will follow. But the question is how do you, so in your experience, right, how do you know that this problem is worth solving, right? So what are the metrics that you, because you don't have a solution at that point of time, and so what are the different methodologies that you use, or different assumptions that you create, or different publications that you follow, or frameworks that you build, to be able to, because I mean, you must have seen these infographics, right, where they say, more than half the startups who fail, they fail because they're
Mm-hmm.
solving the wrong problem. They are building something that nobody wants. And so how do you actually go about understanding whether this problem is worth solving?
Right. So I think that's a very, very tough question because it
Mhm.
it basically involves two separate things. It involves understanding the present and somehow being able to predict the future. Right.
Correct.
And both these things are very, very hard if you are, if you are starting out. Because let's take example, if you mentioned that, how do you know you're solving a problem which is worth solving? Right.
Correct.
The simplest methodology which we have found is, or which works for most is to find the job to be done. Like what
Mhm.
the company or the user wants to get done, right?
Okay.
If the user wants to go from point A to point B, a
Mhm.
horse works, a
Yeah.
bullock, a car works, a plane works, everything works,
Correct.
right? And the question is that can you make your solution, which is much more fast, economical, and more beneficial to the user? If it works and
Yeah.
if it solves the problem of A to B, then you are there, right? So look
Correct.
at patterns that what the user wants to get done. If it gets done with your solution better and economical, then the user will go it because its economics comes into play. He has to save
Correct.
money for his company, so he can profit from his company, and he will use a product which can give us more advantage, more for his own company or for his own
Fair
purposes,
point.
right? That's the first thing that we found. But again, this was not something which just came out as insight. It took us time to realize that
Correct.
that's what we're trying to do. But
Correct.
that was a method that worked. The second thing is predicting the future. This is very hard because it is almost bound to fail, right? You
Mhm.
cannot really predict the future in any sense. But once you talk to customers, and if you're, let's say, you're early in a particular industry or a particular technology, and if you learn a lot about, you read a lot about it, um, or you talk a lot about with people who are in the same technology or same industry, you
Hmm.
somehow are able to sort of build a pattern. Because
Mhm.
new technologies happened in the past also, right? You had, as
Correct.
mentioned, Model T, what you had,
Correct.
the bulb from Edison and so forth, and you have AC and so forth. So all these things, all these technologies happened before. This is the same pattern over
Correct.
and over again. So you
Correct.
read a lot about it, you realize that okay, maybe you are at the starting point of this, or
Mhm.
you are just fooling yourself, right?
Correct.
It might work, it might not just work. So that's the hard thing about it. But as I mentioned, job to be done is a good thing, good framework.
Mhm.
To at least look into. Yeah.
Yeah, that simplifies this question by a lot, and so thank you for sharing that. It's so, and one of the things that I've had this opportunity because of this podcast to speak to a lot of smart entrepreneurs, and all of them have different frameworks to figure out or validate or invalidate the assumptions that they've made. And then ultimately, like, everything boils down to this, right? So what are the jobs to be done, and then how are you going to either save their time or save their money, in kind of that job being done on a recurring basis. In some cases it involves scale, and then everything else is essentially either a variation or like a cherry on top, right? So but that's a basic understanding. um, so coming to the investment bit, right? I think the latest round that you raised was about 2.2 cr, So? And from a group of angels, right? So tell us a little bit about that. So how did you actually go about looking for angel investors? What was the process like for you?
Right. So, our first actual, investor discussion happened in January of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was just, again, just after you, got $20,000, as I mentioned, from Zeroth. The first discussion was just to know about the company. I think it happens a lot. If you raise some money, there'll be people who are interested in the company more, right? Or you
Correct.
come to the surface of the public media, and people are
Correct.
interested in knowing what's going. So that's the first thing that happened. But it's always good to, talk to investors, talk to people very, very, sort of a lot of time before even you're trying to raise money, because you have to
Yeah.
build this connection uh, prior to you can raise money. It's not like you decide to raise money today and tomorrow you can set up a meeting with an investor and then you get money and next of the week. It's not going to happen like that. Yeah, it will
Yeah.
take months, maybe even years, to get to the particular point of actually raising money. Because think about it, right? From the point of view of investor, you are just one asset class in that
Yeah.
sense, right? Like you one asset class, like they can invest the money in n number of asset classes, right?
Correct.
Out of them, one is equity, and in that equity there are thousands of companies looking to raise money, right? In
Correct.
that particular range there is one company they might fund, right?
Yeah.
So if you look from that perspective, you have to start building relationships way before you even decide to raise money or you even have to raise
Correct.
money. That was the first thing. So we built connections with Talkside Donkey with investors just to get in touch with them, share what we're trying to build. Even though we were very early, like our product was embarrassingly slow when we started, but
Yeah.
it was good to get to know these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then when we particular 20K was starting to run out last year, it became sort of crucial to raise money. And of course, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't knew COVID would hit, right? So it will just accelerate
Correct.
the point. But
Correct.
what happened then was that I decided, or that the best thing would be to come out in public to
Mm-hmm.
show our company. Because if there are 1,000 companies out there raising money, how is the investor going to know that he should invest in you if he doesn't even know you?
Correct. Correct.
Don't even know what DeepSync is, how are they going to invest in your company,
Yeah.
right? So the first thing was to come out, and the best way I figured out was to be part of some sort of, as I mentioned, some sort of award-driven competition. So Your Story Tech 30
Mm-hmm.
is the
Yeah.
Amazon is the one, and we applied to both these things. We applied to Your Story Tech 30, we applied to Amazon AI, and in both cases we won, right? We were part of
Oh.
Tech 30, we were
Yeah.
part of won the Amazon AI Award for Media Entertainment, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that propelled us in the public domain at the end of
Yeah.
last year, right? At the same time, we were part of Lightspeed Extreme Entrepreneurs, where
Mm-hmm.
they select a batch of 10 companies to mentor them, right, by Lightspeed VC. And all these things happen simultaneously, which
Okay.
basically protect the public domain, which meant that we got a lot more interest than we were getting prior to that,
Got
right?
it.
At that time, we also had our product much more, you can say, much ready in a sense that it was okay for production. We already had a paying customer at that time. So all
Okay.
these things, happen simultaneously, and it ensured that we could at least talk to potential investors. And
Correct.
that's when conversation started. Now, usually it takes about 4 to 6 months to close a round,
Yeah.
right? Once you start
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
investor. But in our case, COVID hit, like just when you were raising money, right?
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate in some sense because like economy fell, like there was
Yeah.
already a panic market. But since we were solving an important problem, since we already had you can say the requirements to
Mm-hmm.
raise money, right? Having a team, having a product, having a paying customer, having something
Correct.
valuable to solve the market, we were able to raise money during the peak of COVID. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened. It was delayed by a few months, but we were able to close the money in that time.
Awesome, man. And so I think one key takeaway, from the answer that you, I mean, two actually. The first one being that figure out how you can stand out from the crowd, or how can you get some amount of attention, right? And so that framework of thought process in terms of, okay, while you were the center of your own universe, you're just an asset class for some other investor,
Exactly.
right? So, and it's important to remember that. And so how do you so great to know that you're also a Tech 30. We at ClientJoy are also a Tech 30 company. We were there in 2015. Nice to know that. And the other key takeaway being that we should always build relationships, right? And so whenever at any event that I've also spoken at, whenever someone asks what's the right time to start raising funds, I always tell them yesterday, right? So you should have started raising funds yesterday. You may not ask for money, right? You may not be ready to consume any funds yet, but at any point of time, you may want to start building those relationships, start reaching out to those people, and talk to them about what you're doing, right? Don't give them an ask, but just talk to them and ask for some amount of guidance. One of the other unintended but positive consequence of that is also the fact that they start asking you questions which you may not have thought about, right? and,
Right.
and so
Right.
that also kind of pushes you in direction of thinking as to what do you pitch to the next investor that you talk to, right? Okay, these are the questions that they may have. See, the other question that I have from you for you, and this is a challenge that I've personally also faced. So we've raised 3 rounds at ClientJoy thus far, right? So we've raised 20,000, 100,000, and a million. And however, at any point of time, personally, me and I see a lot of other entrepreneurs struggling as well. How do you decide what is the ask that you have, right? What's the funding amount? Because, so as an example, and this is a question that I genuinely have, which is where, let's say, if there's DeepSync, let's say, I think in September you announced, right? So let's assume it may have closed sometime in August, but let's say it's DeepSync in May, right? And in May, if I come to you and if as an investor I say that, hey, here's 6 crores instead of 2.2, or here's a crore instead of 2.2. There is a plan to consume 1 crore as well, and there might be a plan to consume 6 as well, right? So how do you actually come to that this is the amount that I need to raise? How did you do that?
So I think when you're early stage, you should raise only that amount or that sufficient amount which will get to the next stage. And that be depending on your business. It varies very significantly based on your
Correct.
business. If you're a company, you might need more money because it will take time to get to market.
Yeah.
If you're a big company, it might take more money because you have to build relationship with the companies. It might take 3 months to close a customer. If you're a
Yeah.
B2C company, then you might have to prolong your profits for a long time. You have to burn
Yeah.
a lot of money. It depends very widely. But one thing would be don't be greedy. Right? Don't think you can have more money that will solve your problems. More money is actually bad when you're early stage
Yeah.
company because it will give you a sort of a thing that okay, I have a backup plan. But it doesn't matter. I
Correct.
can burn the matter, right? I can just use money and throw at the problem. Doesn't happen.
Yeah.
We have big companies with billions of dollars fail because they were house of cards. Their foundation
Correct.
wasn't strong enough, right? I
Correct.
think that's really important. Uh, I'm sorry, I just got a call in between. So I think
No
that's
worries.
really important to raise that amount of money, which can help you build the foundation. Once
Yeah.
you do that, then worry about the next step. So I think that's the quick answer I can give you.
Yeah, and that's also a good way to put it, right? One of the reasons why so lack of funds is not the only reason why companies die. Companies may also die because of excess of funds, right? Because then
Yeah.
they'll not make their processes efficient or robust, right? Then they start thinking that money is the answer to all the problems, and not
You're right.
and,
Which is
and
not.
and not that, yeah, which is actually incorrect. The other thing that I wanted to understand from you was while you may not be able to share the valuation of the company, but what was the framework that you use? So I'm assuming that a very early stage company. So I don't think the typical valuation methodologies may have been deployed. So how did you arrive at a valuation? What was the conversation of that like with the investor?
So what I can really say is that at this stage, valuation is more like art than it is science, right?
Hmm.
Because we were just two people building the company, right? When we started, asking
Yeah.
or funds, uh, two people is not a company. Two people is
Yeah.
just two people, right? They're
Correct.
looking. They have a product. They might have some customer company, right? They might
Correct.
have a company name,
Yeah.
registered logo or something, but that's not a company in a broader sense, right?
Correct.
They're just
Correct.
people building. So at that time, you have to look at who has the more leverage in that sense. Like if you have a lot of customers, if you don't have issue from for funding, then you have the leverage in that sense. You can decide the terms of the particular agreement. But
Correct.
if not, if you're on the left side of the spectrum where you have no leverage at all, right?
Hmm.
Then the terms are not in your favor at all, right? You might have to accept
Hmm.
the terms if you're looking to raise money at that point in time. We
Correct.
were not in both of the extremes. We were somewhere in the middle, right? We built the technology, we have raised some money, we have a customer life who is using our product. So it was more in that sense, as I mentioned, more art than science. But once once the product gets better, once you have more customers online, then the spectrum changes. Like then you have more and more control over the terms that you want your company to dictate in that sense, right? But at the end of the day, it's all about going to a win-win situation. Investors
Yeah.
are investing in your company on good faith. They want to ensure that your company wins in the bigger market,
Correct.
right? So you
Correct.
should not be greedy in that sense. You should always come to a term which are win-win for
Mm-hmm.
both company and the investors, because they're part of the same ship for as
Yeah.
long as this float. Yeah.
Yeah. So before the and this is one of the things that the latest round of investors also shared with me, that before the signing of the shareholder agreement, we may be sitting across the table. However, as soon as the shareholder agreement is signed, then all of us are on the same side, right? So
Same.
it's us versus rest of the world, and that's how you got to think about it as well.
Yeah.
um, and then moving into the last leg of the conversation, one of the things that I wanted to understand from you was, what was the process or the key factors that you considered um, in terms of um, choosing the investors, or rather than choosing the investors might be a bad way to put it. So in terms of which investors to go after, right? That these are the investors that I want on my cap table or in my company. What are some of the factors that you looked at?
Well, the first was like, do they understand the business what we are doing? Like as I mentioned, we're a
Hmm.
deep tech company, right? Like, do they understand that the company we're building or the product we are building is in that particular niche, right? When we're going after the particular niche, and what the long-term vision of that thing is. Like there should be synergy between your thoughts and the investor thoughts, right? And
Correct.
you can actually, there's always a filter test, right? If you talk to a particular investor and they are not interested in your product, you simply don't go ahead. So that's
Yeah.
a simple fit automatically happens, right? And if you keep pushing, and if you keep talking to multiple investors, at some point, if your product is worthwhile for building, right? If your problem is worthwhile to solve, you will come across an investor who understands one, your problem you're trying to solve,
Hmm.
the solution you're trying to build, and the team that you're trying to build for solving the particular problem. So
Correct.
I think it was a mixture of just keep talking, right? Don't get disheartened if you get, let's say, few no's from few investors, because they're also looking for their kind of synergy. They want to invest in
Correct.
people who they think that they can have bring a synergy on board. If you're a, let's say, a firm that does not invest in energy company, and I come to the energy product and you say no to
Yeah.
me, there's no way to feel disheartened because it simply
Yeah.
doesn't match, right? But
Correct.
if you're an energy player and I come to you with an energy product, then that's a as good as fit as you can get, because it is
Correct.
as synergy as possible. That's the first thing. Talk to as many people as possible, but also narrow your search. Talk to those people who, one, have invested in previous companies with the
Correct.
same business model or same technology, because then they already know the framework. They don't have to research from scratch up. Research
Correct.
takes a lot of, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if they already invested in this particular company, then or particular industry, then that's a good thing to go to talk to them. Or also, talk to, not investor, talk to founders itself, because founders
Okay.
who are the same can give you sort of a reference, or sometimes even can you guide you to which
Hmm.
investor to speak if you are, for the first time, you're looking for particular funds. There's a second thing, right? And the third thing, as I mentioned, right, is a long-term thing. You have to look at, see, every VC or every investor has some time in his mind when he wants to get an
Correct.
exit, for example, right? So you
Correct.
have to ensure that your business can get to that particular exit, or something of that particular requirement that the investor wants to. So
Correct.
synergy is an important thing in that, on these three things.
Awesome, man, and thank you for sharing that. And so this brings me in spirit of reaching out to founders and entrepreneurs who have raised funds, and then talking to them and understanding from them. If an entrepreneur who's working in deep tech, who's watching this podcast, or hearing this podcast, or watching this on YouTube, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, where you'll be able to help them or guide them? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
of course help them if the problem that they're going after is is worth solving in that
Of
sense.
course. And so what I do, guys, is that I'll be linking Ishan's LinkedIn profile in the description of wherever it is that you are watching this, and then you can reach out to him and ask for his guidance in case if you have a question that I've not been able to ask. And then you can reach out and get in touch with him as well. Awesome, yeah. Thank you, Ishan, for this insightful conversation, and thank you for joining us for the funding show today. And I hope to speak with you again soon once you raise your next round of funds as well. Thanks, Ishan.
Sure. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for inviting us.
Bye bye.